A policeman was staring at him with a tight face. "You were almost burnt," he said. Anthony was broken. He almost couldn't speak. "It's okay," the policeman said. "I will leave you alone now." The years after this terrible day, Anthony didn't want to see anyone. He just wanted to be alone, recovering from his wounds and this trauma. He didn't want to know anything of his past anymore, and neither about his study. The newspapers were full of it. He didn't trust anyone anymore. He feared everything. He had many problems in his speaking. He was a broken man, a victim of a strange war. He didn't want to be in nature again. He feared the forest, for there all his memories were wandering. He lived in a house near the sea, the only place he could find a little peace. The trauma had made him numb. The fear was his protection. He was never able to tell about the crime of his wife and his old friend, the policeman. But he knew. So many around him were part of the conspiracy. One day he got a letter from someone from the Young Scientist Association. They wanted to talk to him, for they said that they had worked out his insection-based instruments. They had developed a mechanism which could translate the insection mosaic code into human languages. He was very skeptical about it and didn't respond. A few years later he got another letter, that they got messages from the translated mosaic codes about him. They wanted to speak to him about it. But he thought it could be all part of the conspiracy, so he didn't respond. A few months later he got another letter. This time it contained the messages from the codes. He was like in a shock, for it contained some details he never spoke about. The insection codes also told that they tried to reach him before he met that woman who became his wife. They wanted to warn him. He remembered when he first started to get the insection mosaics on screen, that these were so wild that everything started to get overheated. The letter contained details from his earlier dreams, explaining that these dreams were insection dreams. And he remembered that he was already warned by these dreams, that there were spies, and that there could be spies. He felt like he failed. But now he was right on track. It was like his body was in fire, but this time it was like everything was regenerating. He made an appointment to speak to the boys. They showed him the equipment and how it worked. Now he heard and saw it with his own eyes. It worked. And it was true. New revolutions came on Earth since the codes were cracked. It seemed this new insection technology showed easily the conspiracies, like it was in his dreams. But he knew this was only one step in the good direction. People from conspiracies couldn't handle this new technology. The frequencies were burning them inside. The hospitals were full. Organizations started to melt away. For this was a very personal technology. It was like a holocaust. People were setting fire. It was burning their organs away. Anthony remembered the dream about the woman with her head in fire. It became a reality now. There was a rising war on Earth. People who started to burn tried to destroy as much as they could. The population started to split. It was like apocalypse on Earth. There were forest fires and even some seas were burning. It was like hell on Earth. And the fire started to rage more and more. There were skeletons on the streets. Babies were screaming. Playgrounds were burning away. Schools, churches, justice courts, shops. And the fire was spreading more and more. There was smoke everywhere. There were shelters built for the survivors, and some hospitals could stand tall in this storm. The conspiracy was falling. It was like the face of identification was showing itself. All the masks were falling off. It was the tragedy of truth, coming to set them free. People couldn't stop this fire. It was eating its way to the core. The war was without mercy. Young scientists became leaders of the survivals. Deep underground shelters were built and used, while the new insection computers and observatoriums were built further. The tragedy of truth was now leading them. Almost all other governments were falling. Many famous leaders were totally burnt to the ground. Many famous pop singers and spurtheros. They all appeared to be members of the big conspiracy. New education systems were rising, insect-based. There were screens on which you could see the mosaic appearing on one side, while on the other side the translation appeared in many human languages giving very detailed information. It set people on fire. It healed or destroyed. And everyone needed to be tested. Babies, young people, old people. They all went through the scan. The population was getting cleared. It was a mass identification. The electricity was very wild. And it started to be the main force of many instruments. The world was getting ready for insection cybernetica and a new cyborg structure. Many famous old scientists were shot away. A total new scientific government started to form itself on Earth, with many young leaders. It was like the insects were born on Earth. Humanity became taller and thinner. Men started to let their hair and beards grow. It was like Jesus was returning to Earth. Native Americans and other minorities got their honor back. But Anthony was very skeptical. He knew that this was only one step in identification. This was only the first wave. And he warned the people for it. He said there were still many conspiracies. For insection energy could also be infiltrated. He advised humanity to stay calm, to prepare for new unmaskings. For higher technologies. Humanity trusted this old man for that. He was now 65 and worshipped like never before. He was the hero of the youth. And the savior of the old. But he still didn't like all the attention. He wanted to live in silence. He saw the dangers hanging over the earth. He was now an old advisor of the different governments. A prophet whom they feared. Chapter 6. The Dream. One night Anthony got a dream again. He and the other 4 bloodhounds walked to a white castle in the distance. It looked like a palace. When they were in, they saw an old woman who was like waiting for them. She was clothed in white. But they didn't see this woman before. She held a die before their eyes and said that their whole world was living in this die. When Anthony woke up, he didn't know what to do with this dream, but it was spinning in his head. What would this woman mean by this? And who was she? It was really like he started to feel himself living in a cube. And there had to be a way out. In a strange way he started to get hope again. Like the way out was forming itself before his eyes. It was like Earth was traveling to the exit. Since that dream the air became stranger and stranger, and Anthony found out that there were block energies coming into existence. The energies started to split more and more to form blocks all over the world. It was like the insections were building a total new world. Because the energies concentrated themselves on certain places, all people could see it. It was like a new sort of radiation in the atmosphere. People were put into divisions by these blocks, and it was like a strange hand took the world over. Meanwhile, science developed itself in insect-based technology, and one was specifying the several areas in this. The wasp electricities could be caught and seemed to be very useful in many ways. One was even thinking that these new block energies had all to do with the wasp frequencies. And soon they got these frequencies on the screen. It seemed that the wasps communicated by holograms, mostly by cubes, looking like dice in many cases. One could trace the different forms of this unique communication. And it seemed the more they developed this wasp base in technology, the more hidden secrets were being revealed. There were more exposures of conspiracies, but this time it seemed that these remained enemies were too strong. It would be the beginning of the block wars. Everywhere in families and organizations there were splits, and the blocks were in war with each other. On both sides there was much protection. The blocks were very strong. But sometimes there were enormous explosions and large changings in the orders of blocks. On both sides they had developed Waspian armor, based on the Waspian energy they could store by several new invented tools. It was a war of Waspian cyborgs, and on both sides they were developing the technologies. By the releasement of this new electricity in so many ways, the Earth temperature was becoming hotter and hotter, and science found out that wasps directly tap from the suns in different cosmoses. The Earth was about to change into a new sun, and science was in a race against the clock to prepare humanity for that. It was like the sun was touching the Earth, but it was not the same energy. It was a controlled and concentrated energy, a focused energy, and it seemed the block war was a solar cocoon for humanity to learn how to handle solar energy.